There are movies you watch once, enjoy, and forget. And then there are movies that burrow so deep into your memory that certain scenes, certain lines, certain images become part of who you are. Forrest Gump is one of those rare films. Released in 1994, it swept the Academy Awards, shattered box office expectations, and turned a simple man, sitting on a park bench, into one of the most beloved characters in cinema history. People have watched this movie dozens of times. Film students have dissected it. Critics have debated it for 3 decades. You would think that by now, every secret, every mistake, every hidden detail would have been found, tagged, and cataloged. But here's the thing about Forrest Gump. It keeps surprising you. Because buried inside this celebrated film, hiding in plain sight across some of its most iconic scenes, is a collection of bloopers, historical inaccuracies, and behind-the-scenes decisions so significant that even the most devoted fans never caught them. Today, we are pulling back the curtain completely. We are going scene by scene, detail by detail, and exposing what the filmmakers never expected anyone to notice. Stay with us, because some of what you are about to hear will genuinely change the way you watch this film forever. Let's start with the most jaw-dropping revelation of all, and it involves the most famous line Tom Hanks ever delivered in this movie. When Forrest sits down beside a stranger at that bus stop and introduces himself by saying, "My name is Forrest Gump. People call me Forrest Gump." Audiences laughed, smiled, and immediately understood everything they needed to know about this character. The line is so perfectly constructed, so precisely timed, that it feels like a master screenwriter spent weeks crafting it. Except no screenwriter wrote it at all. That line was a complete and total ad-lib. Tom Hanks improvised it entirely on the spot, and director Robert Zemeckis was so caught off guard by its charm that he kept the camera rolling and ultimately kept it in the final cut. What was supposed to be a straightforward introduction became one of the most quoted movie lines in history, born not from a carefully polished script, but from a spontaneous creative impulse on a film set. The fact that something so unscripted could become so permanently attached to a film's identity says everything about the kind of magic that was happening during the production of Forrest Gump. The timeline problem that breaks the whole story. Now here is where things get genuinely fascinating, because this next blooper is not a prop falling out of frame or an actor-breaking character. This is a historical inaccuracy baked directly into the film's narrative structure, and once you see it, you cannot unsee it. The film places Forrest at the White House, shaking hands with President John F. Kennedy, as part of the All-America football team. It is presented as one of those magical intersections between Forrest's fictional life and real American history. The problem? The Associated Press did not announce its All-America team until December 6, 1963. John F. Kennedy was assassinated on November 22, 1963, 2 weeks before that announcement was ever made. In the real world, there was simply no version of events in which a college football player named to that year's All-America team could have met President Kennedy, because Kennedy was already gone by the time the team was formally named. The filmmakers either missed this entirely or made a deliberate choice to blur the timeline in service of the story. Either way, it stands as one of the most significant historical errors in a film that staked much of its identity on weaving fictional moments into real historical events. The entire premise of Forrest Gump rests on the idea that his life touched the edges of genuine American history. When the history turns out to be wrong, it quietly undermines the foundation the film was built on. The running timeline contradiction. But the Kennedy scene is not the only place where the film's timeline quietly falls apart. Consider Forrest's legendary cross-country run, the sequence that spans years of his life, and became one of the most emotionally resonant stretches of the entire movie. According to the film's internal logic, Forrest begins his run on or around July 5, 1976. During the run, he passes a barbershop where a television is broadcasting news that President Jimmy Carter has suffered from heat exhaustion. That event is a real one. It happened on September 15, 1979, during a charity race in Maryland. Here is the problem. Jimmy Carter did not become President of the United States until January 20th, 1977. If Forrest started running in July of 1976, he began his journey before Carter was even in office. The news broadcast that appears during his run references Carter as president during a period that, according to the film's own established timeline, predates Carter's presidency. It is a continuity error hiding inside what appears to be an authentic historical reference, and it is so smoothly embedded into the flow of the film that audiences have been nodding along to it for 30 years without question. While we are examining things that were not quite what they appeared to be, we need to talk about Lieutenant Dan. Gary Sinise delivered one of the most emotionally powerful performances in the film as the bitter, broken officer who loses both legs during the Vietnam War. Audiences watching the film were confronted with what appeared to be a genuinely disturbing physical reality. Lieutenant Dan, from the knees down, simply was not there. What the audience was actually seeing was a combination of careful costume work and groundbreaking digital effects. Sinise wore a specialized blue fabric covering over his lower legs during filming, which allowed the visual effects team to digitally erase everything below a certain point in post-production. For its time, this was considered a remarkably sophisticated use of CGI, and it worked so convincingly that many viewers never thought to question it. The seamlessness of the illusion is a testament to how far special effects had come by the mid-90s, and also to how completely Sinise inhabited that character. When an actor performs with that level of conviction, the audience stops looking for the trick. Speaking of things that were not what they appeared, here's one that ought to reframe every single Vietnam War sequence in the film. Those dense, suffocating jungle scenes that placed Forrest and his platoon in the heart of combat, the ones that felt authentic enough to draw genuine commendations from military historians, were filmed on a golf course in South Carolina. Specifically, the production used Fripp Island and Hunting Island State Park as their primary locations, supplementing the existing landscape with additional palmetto trees and substantial CGI work to simulate the dense vegetation of Southeast Asian jungle terrain. The fact that a golf course in South Carolina was convincingly transformed into the Vietnamese jungle is either a remarkable tribute to the filmmaker's craft or a significant commentary on how thoroughly Hollywood can manufacture reality. Military historian Bill Allison reviewed the Vietnam sequences and praised their accuracy, particularly noting how realistically the film depicted Viet Cong ambush tactics and the general chaos of jungle combat. He was praising the authenticity of scenes filmed on a recreational sports course in coastal South Carolina. That detail alone deserves a moment of quiet astonishment. Here is a detail that reframes one of the film's most poignant early scenes in a way that feels almost surreal once you know it. When young Forrest climbs onto that school bus for the first time and faces rejection from child after child before Jenny finally offers him a seat, the two children who turn him away were not professional child actors hired for small supporting roles. They were family members of the people making the film. The boy who refuses Forrest a seat is Alexander Zemeckis, the son of director Robert Zemeckis. The girl who similarly rejects him is Elizabeth Hanks, the daughter of Tom Hanks himself. The man directing the scene arranged for his own son to reject the character that another man's son, sitting behind the camera as one of the biggest stars in Hollywood, had devoted himself entirely to playing. There is something almost poetic about that. Two fathers collaborating on a story about kindness and belonging, and choosing their own children to embody the casual cruelty of childhood exclusion. It was an intimate, almost playful decision that gave the scene a strange undercurrent of real family feeling. Forrest Gump is famous for inserting its title character into real historical moments through digitally manipulated footage. What is less well known is that one of the film's most charming cameo sequences involved a voice that audiences heard without ever knowing whose it was, and the secret was kept for over 12 years. In the scene where young Elvis Presley stays at Forrest's family home and picks up his signature hip-shaking dance moves, the physical performance was delivered by actor Peter Dobson. But the voice speaking Elvis's lines did not belong to Dobson at all. It belonged to Kurt Russell, who had previously played Elvis Presley in John Carpenter's 1979 biographical film and was approached by Zemeckis specifically because the original voice recording was not working. Russell agreed, recorded the new lines, and then apparently told almost nobody. The cameo remained an open secret among a handful of crew members until 2016, when Russell himself confirmed it publicly in a GQ interview. He admitted that he was not even sure whether the other actors on set had been informed about the substitution. For 12 years, audiences heard Kurt Russell's voice coming out of Elvis Presley's mouth and simply accepted it as part of the magic of the film. The park bench where Forrest tells his life story to a rotating parade of strangers has become one of the most recognized props in cinema history. It sat in Chippewa Square in Savannah, Georgia, and the production team took extraordinary care in positioning it correctly, going so far as to work with local police to reverse the flow of traffic around the square to ensure the bus pickup scenes looked exactly right. For identical benches were used during filming. Here is what most people never think to ask. Why is Forrest sitting at a bus stop narrating his entire life story to strangers in the first place? The device works emotionally and cinematically, but it requires accepting that a man would sit at a public bus stop for what the film implies is an extended period of time, telling elaborate personal stories to people waiting for a bus, and that those people would sit and listen attentively rather than quietly moving away. It is one of the film's most fundamental conceits, and the bench has become so iconic that the artificiality of the setup has been completely absorbed into the mythology. One of the original 4 benches now lives behind protective barriers in the Savannah History Museum. You can look at it, but you cannot sit on it. The remaining 3 are somewhere in private collections, their locations largely unknown. Perhaps the most astonishing blooper is not a mistake made during production, but a creative decision that almost deleted the film's most memorable sequence entirely. Forrest's cross-country run, that 7-minute montage of bearded, long-haired Gump crisscrossing America and accidentally inspiring an entire cultural movement, nearly did not exist. Paramount Pictures refused to fund the sequence, citing the considerable cost involved in filming across multiple locations over nearly a month of consecutive shooting days. Tom Hanks has described how director Zemeckis approached him with a proposition. They would both personally finance the sequence in exchange for a larger share of the film's eventual profits. Hanks agreed. The 2 men funded one of cinema's most beloved sequences out of their own pockets, because the studio would not. The film went on to gross more than $678 million worldwide. The investment returned to both of them many times over. But the fact remains that the run, the sequence that gave us a bearded Forrest stopping in the middle of the road to tell his followers that he was tired and thought he would go home now, exists only because 2 people refused to let a budget decision kill something they believed in. Forrest Gump has been celebrated for 30 years as a near-perfect film, a seamless blend of history, humor, heartbreak, and hope. But as we have seen today, perfection was never quite the reality. The timelines do not always line up. The history is not always accurate. The jungle was a golf course. The legs were not real. The most famous line was never written. And the run itself nearly never happened. None of this diminishes the film. If anything, knowing all of this makes it more remarkable. Forrest Gump is not a perfect film. It is something better than that. It is a film made by human beings who improvised brilliantly, who fought for what they believed in, who made mistakes and kept going anyway. Which, when you think about it, is pretty much exactly what the film is about. Life is like a box of chocolates. You never know what you're going to get. But sometimes, the surprises are the best part.